I know what you're thinking, punk. You're thinking, did he fire 6 shots or only 5? And to tell you the truth, I forgot myself in all this excitement. But being this is a 44 Magnum, the most powerful handgun in the world, and will blow your head clean off, you've got to ask yourself a question. Do I feel lucky? Well, do you, punk?
All right. I first started drawing cartoons, I think, when I was in the womb, because I don't ever remember a time when I wasn't drawing. When I was a kid, I would get down on the floor and I would open up the Sunday Funnies and start copying the Peanuts and the other cartoons in the paper. And then as I got a little older, my dad had New Yorker magazine and I would read all the cartoons. And then later I would buy Mad magazine, and I dreamed about maybe one day being an artist for Mad. But it wasn't until I got into college that I started thinking about editorial cartoon as a serious profession. I did my first editorial cartoon. It ran and it got letters on both sides of the issue, and I thought, wow, this is great. You know, I could do this.
As the editorial page editor, I'm in charge of the opinion section, and that means working with the editorial writers to write editorials that represent the viewpoint of the paper. My relation with Rob is simple. Rob's the jokester, the frat boy, the wise guy, and I have to play the grown-up. Rob's job is to push the envelope, to make snappy and lively and very funny political cartoons. And it's, you know, my job to make sure that they're within the bounds of taste and good humor. When readers get angry, often on the phone, the best thing I can do is listen. And that applies to whether they're angry at a cartoon or at an editorial that we've written. They want to vent and they want to be heard. And I, of course, invite them to send us a letter to the editor. You know, I don't give out Rob's home phone number, even though I might like to, but I will handle the criticism as best I can. It is an image, and you immediately get it, and you laugh or you hate it, but you react quickly. And whether that becomes video, as some cartoonists are experimenting with, or something else, you know, the cartoon and the visual commentary will always be with us.
The one question that I get asked the most is, where do you get your ideas? I like to say, well, I get my ideas off of eBay, but that nobody ever believes that. It's hard to describe where I get my ideas. I get about 3 newspapers at home every day, and I read those to find topics and subjects that really are things that I can grab onto. I look at the internet, I watch cable news, and I write down a lot of topics in my sketchbook, and then I stare out the window for hours. And then the magic happens, and I don't really know how to explain the magic. It just happens. But then once the idea comes, I write it down and I sketch it out, and the rest is history. I have been drawing professionally since 1984, so I came in at the very end of the 1984 campaign. So I got to draw Walter Mondale. You know, that was an interesting election. He was running against Reagan, and he didn't do so well, but he was a lot of fun to draw. Geraldine Ferraro ended up being his running mate, which was very historic, the very first woman candidate for vice president. This is where I spend most of my day, at the drafting table. Here's my ink, here are my pencils, here's my eraser, my brushes. But while I was at the conventions, I didn't have the safety of my drawing table. All the conventions I've covered up to this point have been me with a sketchbook, drawing what I see and sending the sketches back to the newspaper. They get reprinted as a full page of sketches, several sketches a day, and that was great, but it doesn't take into account the newer technology that we have now. In 2008, I also did a blog, but I was still mainly doing sketches from there. I have a few interesting blog entries from those conventions. I actually got to do some reporting, which was different for me, and I like that. This time I was able to take a video camera with me and do something totally different. This harmonica holder was actually what I ended up using at the conventions to hold the camera. So what I would do is I would turn on the little flip camera and I would hold my sketch pad in front of me like this, and I would draw and I would film the drawing. So that's how I got some of the drawings that you see in the video. So when I wasn't sketching something, I might be filming it. It was interesting because I could think outside of the page and I could think about, well, would this be a better video or would it be a better sketch? And that was really kind of fun because I could do more things that I wouldn't have done just with cartoons. So that was exciting.
The Toonseum is Pittsburgh's Museum of Comic and Cartoon Art. It is one of only 2 museums in the United States dedicated exclusively to comics, cartoons, animation, editorial cartoons, and greeting card art, all things cartoons. The United States of America is perhaps the only country in the world whose entire history is documented in cartoon form. From Benjamin Franklin's famous cartoon of the snake cut into pieces with the phrase "join or die," all the way up to 9/11, every major event that has happened in the United States, good, bad, or otherwise, has been documented in cartoons. So I think it both reflects who we are and helps us aspire to who we could be. Rob Rogers is one of my oldest, and he's just one of the oldest friends I have. Brilliant, creative, genius, talented, I think are all words Rob Rogers would use to describe me. So I have to find something nice to say about him. Rob Rogers is a remarkable cartoonist. He is a big part of the Toonseum. I think you could literally say, you know, his work is really one of the things that keeps the Toonseum's doors open. The Toonseum has done a lot of different political and editorial exhibitions. I think projects like this really broaden the horizons of the Toonseum. It examines the power and impact of cartoons, and especially editorial cartoonists.
The Indiegogo idea was suggested by Joe Wose of the Toonseum. It's no secret that newspapers are hurting in this economy, and they were looking for ways to cut some of their expenses. So I decided that I would try to find another way to get to the convention. The Indiegogo campaign was a way for me to cover the conventions, but try doing something new outside of my comfort zone. I tried to think of my donors as my editors. I figured that they would be looking at everything that I sent back, but I also knew that they were there rooting for me and supporting me along the way. The first convention I ever covered was 1988, when George H.W. Bush picked Dan Quayle as his running mate. Bush thought that perhaps he would help with the women's vote. He certainly didn't have a military career of any kind, and he certainly wasn't the smartest egg in the nest. If I had to choose a favorite presidential candidate of all time, it would have to be Ross Perot. He was this short little Texan billionaire who had these great big ears, and he used to say funny things, little folksy metaphors. That's like putting a raccoon in a blender. It's just gonna make a mess. I remember one cartoon in particular where I drew Ross Perot filming his own infomercial because they wouldn't include him in the debates. The Republican field was rich with great, diverse, crazy candidates this time around. We had people like Newt Gingrich, who not only complained about Mitt Romney's pious baloney, but he also decided that we should colonize the moon. So I thought, well, yeah, let's make him president of the moon. That would be great. We had Herman Cain, who was the pizza mogul who had his great 999 plan, although nobody really knew what that meant. Plan 999 from outer space or something. Rick Santorum, who was waging his own personal war against women and gays. You also had Rick Perry, governor of Texas, with his crazy ideas about Ponzi schemes. I remember when Sarah Palin was picked as vice president and everybody was all excited at this choice. Her personality really sort of came out and made it easy for all of us to caricature her. On my way down to Tampa, I decided that I needed to practice drawing Paul Ryan because he had just been picked as vice president. The good thing about Paul Ryan was he's got that widow's peak, he kind of looks like a vampire, and he's got those great eyebrows and you know, big nose and a nice strong jaw. So he was actually not as tough as others that I've had to draw. But when I got down to Tampa, Hurricane Isaac was threatening, so everybody was talking about how it was going to affect the convention. The first day ended up getting canceled because they were worried about Hurricane Isaac. So, so that gave me some extra time to practice my caricature of Paul Ryan. Hanging out with the Republicans was a little strange. It was kind of like that movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers, where Donald Sutherland walks around and tries not to be noticed by all the aliens, and then when one finally notices him and sees that he's a human, they scream. And I was afraid that was going to happen to me when I was on the floor of the Republican National Convention. I'm outside the Tampa Bay Times Forum, and I'm about to enter the belly of the beast.
Here, we'll nominate Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan to be the next president and vice president of the United States of America.
I'm here on the floor of the convention center. I got my floor pass. Within an hour, I ran into John Boehner, Cokie Roberts, Eric Cantor, and even Herman Cain.
I'm good. Good to see you. How are you?
Speaking of the belly of the beast, Chris Christie looks like he could eat all of the other candidates for president when he runs in 2016. I'm here with Mitt Romney, candidate for president. Hi Mitt, how you doing? Now some people have accused you of being too stiff and mechanical. How do you feel about that? Unlike a lot of the serious journalists that go to the conventions, I'm not as concerned about interviewing the delegates, about who they're going to vote for, or what they want their candidate to know about their state, or any of that stuff. I'm more interested in what they're wearing. And I was able to walk around with the flip camera and get a lot of footage of hats. And more hats, and more hats, and more hats, and more hats, and I don't even know what you would call this. One thing that happened while I was on the floor, I ran into Jim Roddy. Jim recently complained about a cartoon that I drew of him, so I was able to get him to draw me as payback, and that was really one of the most unique experiences I've ever had at a convention, because normally you don't get that personal interaction. At the Democratic convention, I ran into Dennis Kucinich, who offered to draw a cartoon for me.
He's signing an autograph. He's
drawing a cartoon.
I'm drawing a cartoon, okay. So you got the Bank of America field.
Okay.
Okay, and so you've got the The bankers who are here. That's it, okay?
All right, don't forget to sign it. Don't forget to sign it. All right. Thank you so much.
Now you're on your own.
Okay.
It's good to see you.
One of the interesting things that happens is you run into other journalists, and this time I ran into my friend Scott Stannis, who's the cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune. I'm here at the Charlotte Convention Center, and as you can see, down in the basement is where all the journalists are working. So we're going to go down and take a look. Follow me.
This is our Twitter political index, in which we're measuring conversation and sentiment about the candidates. Entire Republican National Convention, Saturday to Saturday, drove approximately 4 million total tweets. Last night's events drove already 3 million tweets, and we were just into the first night.
I'm here with Scott Stannis, editorial cartoonist for the Chicago Tribune, and we are at the Tribune Media Center, where he has convinced people that I'm a decent guy and that I should be able to work in this space with him. I am rigging up a very sophisticated flip cam system so that I can film myself drawing cartoons.
Hi ho, it's home from work we go. Hi ho, hi ho, hi ho, hi ho, hi ho, it's home from work we go.
The Republican convention had its very own Romney Ryan souvenir store. There were hats, there were all kinds of stuff. You can take souvenirs and you can exaggerate them and make cartoons out of them, so of course I did. You'll be happy to know that Mitt Romney did not ship the job of making the t-shirts overseas to China. They were all made in America. One of the things that happens at every convention is that there are protesters. Back in 2008, I remember part of my blog was that I went in search of protesters, and I kept missing them. There were protesters there, but I kept missing them. So I made it sort of a quest to find the protester in 2008, and I finally did. In 2012, I found him right away. The interesting thing to me is that they seem to be more organized to protest against the Democratic convention than they were against the Republican convention, and I think that's just because we have a Democratic president, and they also figure that the Republicans aren't going to be listening to them anyway. So what's the use? The protesters were marching against a wide variety of issues. The banks, Wall Street, war, you name it. They were there to be heard. Am I the only one who finds it odd that this protest ran more smoothly and efficiently than the government they were protesting?
And we have no interest in war. We have no interest in drones. We have no interest in banks ruling over the people of this country or dominating the people around the world.
Bailed out. We got sold out. Banks got 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 bailed out.
There were some very serious issues that were being protested, so of course, even though I wanted to do cartoons about them, I had to kind of pick and choose what subject matter I wanted to do. There was one group that came from Arizona. They were basically protesting immigration issues, and I thought that was a pretty serious topic, and I wanted to do it justice.
Natalie, tell me about this group.
This group is part of the group No Papers, No Fear, Right for Justice. It's about, we have mothers, fathers, day laborers, you know, a little bit of everything. What we're trying to do, you know, take out the message when we rode through the South is saying that we don't want no more families to be separated. We're tired of us, we want dignity and respect for all of us. That's what we want.
And tell me about the bus tour. Did you come on the bus?
Yes, I came on the bus from Arizona, which started July 29th, and it will be ending this Friday.
Friday, okay, great. Well, good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you.
People's Assembly, no matter where you are, we stand together, we fight together, we struggle together, we die together.
There were a lot of great speeches at both conventions, but I think it's pretty clear who gave the best speech.
This Republican narrative, its alternative universe, says that every one of us in this room who amounts to anything, we're all completely self-made. That we're all in this together is a far better philosophy than you're on your own.
Clearly, Bill Clinton gave the best speech of both conventions. At that point, we didn't know it would be the best speech, so I didn't draw a cartoon about it, but I did manage to do a cartoon about Obama's speech, which wasn't quite as hopeful as it was in 2008. The biggest difference between the Republican convention and the Democratic convention were the faces in the audience. The Democrats had a lot more diversity than the Republicans. There was also a huge enthusiasm gap between the two conventions. At the Republican convention, there was more the feeling of resignation about their candidate, and at the Democratic convention, they were thrilled to be rooting for Obama again. On the morning after Obama's speech, I was sitting in my hotel room and trying to figure out how I was going to wrap this whole thing up. And that's when I decided to do a full-page sketch of everything that I had garnered from the conventions. I talk about how my first convention was in 1988 and how it felt like the Stone Age because the technology was so bad. I talk about how I need 8 hands to use all the technology now. I talk about how the hurricane was a factor, how security was off the hook, how at the RNC there was a lack of diversity, which was to be expected, but what was unexpected was the sheer lack of enthusiasm for Mitt Romney. Most of their energy was channeled into hating Obama. Of course, I mentioned the empty chair. When I got to Charlotte, the mood was totally different. I compare it to The Wizard of Oz. Even the protesters seemed happier. There was a lot more diversity there than in Tampa. I talked about how everybody loved Clinton's speech. And finally, I talk about how the glow didn't last because Obama got home to some unfavorable jobless numbers. So the last night of the Republican convention, I left early to get back to the hotel so I could start sketching. I wanted to watch Mitt Romney's speech from the hotel bar. What I didn't know was that I should have stayed because that's when Clint Eastwood came out. But the great thing was I was sitting in that hotel bar watching the speech, and I looked over and the chair that was sitting next to me looked like the chair that Clint Eastwood was talking to. So I immediately thought, oh, well, I've got to interview this chair and see what he thought about the speech. So that's how I came up with the idea to do a video about the chair.
Excuse me, how do you feel that Clint Eastwood's chair performed last night during the Republican convention? Do you believe in same-sex chair marriage? You were made in Taiwan. Do you think you're taking a job away from an American-made chair? What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I didn't realize that was your wife. I apologize. So do you believe there's a Republican war on wicker? Or is that just something the Democrats made up? So you're saying your reputation would preclude you from a political career? You're in a upholstered chair. Do you feel that the Democrats or the Republicans are more fair to upholstered Americans? Do you have any political aspirations yourself?
Yeah, here's Richard. Actually, this is Richard Nixon. I am not a crook. I am not a crook.